Now broadcasting from the Next Gen Conservative Studio in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report with Sam Whitfield.
Welcome to this very special edition of the Whitfield Report. We're doing a James Bond kind of special show, and joining us for this segment is Mark Hunt, who is a host of the Planet of the Apes podcast, and also I've known him for a couple of years through the Dennis Miller old radio show forums, and if you remember, a few weeks ago we had Christian Blatt on to discuss Norm Macdonald, and so Mark is from that universe, at least from kind of where I know him. So, Mark, welcome to the show, and just what's your background, kind of, I guess, in terms of the whole podcast thing? You've been at this for a while.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's great to be on here. Great to finally talk to you after mostly just chatting online and through message boards for years.
Yeah.
I started, my son, who at the time was maybe a freshman in high school, and one of my best friends I've known forever, who's about my age. Three of us back in, I'm going to say 2013, decided to do a podcast, and we just out of the blue picked Planet of the Apes, something that there wasn't really a lot of podcasts of, unlike something like Star Wars or Star Trek, where there's hundreds of. We just got together and we decided we would talk about Planet of the Apes. My son, who never saw him, I thought it'd be interesting to get a younger person's perspective. So our podcast is basically, we went through all the movies, the new ones, the old ones, Tim Burton, the TV show, the cartoon show, comics, books, just a little bit of everything, just doing a roundtable discussion. And we've been doing that for years. And then once COVID hit, it was getting harder and harder for us to get together. So for the last year, I've just been kind of going solo, doing what I call coffee and quarantine commentaries, where I'm watching the TV show with a cup of coffee and just chatting through the whole thing. And hope to get back together soon with the guys and keep going. But yeah, we're still going. Podcast of the Apes. I think you Google us, we're pretty much everywhere.
So kind of like a riff tracks style deal.
These are, the previous ones weren't. The previous ones, we would watch them in our own time, and then we would just get together and just talk about them. In fact, like we mentioned, we were our mutual love of Dennis Miller. I think in one of our earlier episodes, Dennis Miller's a guest on the show, and I got to interview him. And we did about a quick 15-minute interview, and we talk about Planet of the Apes. We talk about Bordello of Blood. We even talk a little James Bond. So, so that was one of the thrills. That's like my big claim to fame with podcasting, is I got to interview Dennis Miller.
Yeah, I actually, I have to admit, I stole your handle for Discord at one point, because I know that you're originally Rafe Gutman, and Bordello of Blood is also one of my favorite B movies, as it were. So I had that for a brief period of time, and I'm like, oh wait, that's actually Mark's. So,
what? I did not know that.
So yeah, there were two Rafe Gutmans running around out there on the internet, I guess.
Technically three if you count Dennis.
Yeah, he's the
Rafe,
he's
Rafe Prime, as I call him.
Yeah. So, but as you and I discovered several years ago, we're kind of the Bond aficionados, I guess, of the Dennis Miller forum, I guess. And you, I mean, I consider myself kind of an aficionado, but you have infinitely.
You see behind me here.
Yeah, you have everything. I mean, you have a poster of, for those listening on audio, I think there's like a poster of Craig on the wall there, and there's also like a couple of figurines back
Oh,
there, and
there's about 3 bookcases behind me. You're only seeing a small portion. Plus I have an upstairs TV room it's got a high ceiling. It's about 2 stories tall. It's very high. I've probably got a dozen James Bond posters up there.
yeah,
You're only
I've
seeing
seen
a fraction of the collection here.
I've seen pictures of it, and it's very impressive. So, how'd you get into Bond? Kind of. That's always interesting.
Wow. I guess my first run-in with James Bond, I mean, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was born in 1970. So, the summer of 77 when Star Wars came out, that was kind of every kid just was a Star Wars nut. And
Sure.
I remember it was years later. It was probably 79-ish. I remember before Empire had come out, I was in went over to my best friend's house, and his name was BJ, and he had a collection of Star Wars Topps trading cards. And I was flipping through them and like, oh, this is cool. And I started finding these other trading cards of something called Moonraker. And it's got, this giant guy with big metal teeth, and it's got a guy in a spacesuit with a tuxedo underneath, and he's got laser guns. And I'm like, what in the world is this? And he's like, oh, it's a spy movie thing. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, another sci-fi movie for me to get into. And it was back then, this is pre-DVD, pre-VHS.
Right.
The only way to see James Bond movies, they would most of the time back then, they were airing them on the ABC network as the Sunday night movie.
Yeah.
And I would catch snippets of them, and it really, and I started to learn who James Bond was, but it wasn't really, and I saw him on Roger Moore on the Muppet Show, and it really wasn't until actually my friend BJ, I went over to his house for Your Eyes Only had been out for a while, and it was on HBO. His family had HBO, and it was one Saturday morning. I was like, it came on, and we decided to sit and watch it, and I fell in love with it. I thought I loved it. I loved it. Kind of fell in love with that whole genre, and just kind of that's where it pretty much began.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because for me and for a lot of my friends, I mean, I was born in the 90s, and so like a lot of folks my age, my first exposure to Bond was with GoldenEye, not the movie, but with the
video
game with the game that came out for the N64, and then like I remember like I played the Tomorrow Never Dies game, and I'm like, wait, this is a movie series because
Yep.
they were they like inserted little like movie clips in the game, and so I went back and watched the Pierce Brosnan films, and then really got into it. And then like around the time I was 12 or so, like I did a whole kind of that was when the first kind of like mega collection of DVDs had like come out, and so I did like a massive watch through. Me and my best friend did, and then that was like in 2000. I think that was like in 2004 or 5, and then Daniel Craig got announced as the Bond. So it's weird because I consider Pierce Brosnan to kind of be the Bond I grew up with, and it's very interesting because I remember, I mean I often say I'm old enough to remember when people kind of were reluctant about Daniel Craig being the new Bond. I mean, there was big animus, towards.
Yeah, someone had started a website like craignotbond.com, and
yeah,
the press conference where he comes up, they introduced him. They brought him in on a boat off the Thames.
Yeah,
had an outdoor press conference set up, and he comes in. And he's wearing a life jacket, and I mean, the press just ridiculed him. He was blonde. He was wearing a life jacket on a boat. They just thought he was just not going to be Bond. They were just not convinced.
Yeah, no, I I remember that, and I mean, I actually went back and kind of rewatched that clip last night after my live stream, and yeah, it's he looked like way different, like in within a year, kind of the transformation that he did, for Casino Royale was pretty impressive.
Well, before that had come out, I went back and he had done a movie. Because as soon as I found out he was going to be Bond, I was like, okay, I got to research this guy. I got to find out everything I can about him. And he had done a movie called Layer Cake.
Yeah.
And he played a gangster in that movie, and he's really good. I went and saw that. I think I rented the DVD or something. I thought, okay, he's actually really good. I saw I can kind of see it. And I didn't even know it. He was one of my favorite TV shows was Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and he played a bad guy on that. I was like, right, okay, very bit part. So I kind of was. The more I kind of dug into his past and his career, I was like, okay, I think this guy could do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the big thing with Craig was in Casino Royale was I think the expectations were so low.
Yeah, yeah.
That when Casino Royale came out and did what it did, people were, I mean, just kind of amazed that not only was he, not only did he pull off a good Bond, but in many people's minds, he then kind of became the definitive James Bond. Which,
I mean, if you look at a lot of I know a lot of Bond fans, their top 3 Bond movies, almost a lot of them, Casino Royale's up there with a lot of Bond fans.
Yeah, I mean, in Casino Royale is like a strong entry, and the thing about Craig's movies is I've noticed they kind of have like an up and down type of path. They're either really good or they're really bad. Like Casino Royale scores like very high, and then Quantum of Solace did poorly, and I think that was mostly because of the writer's strike that happened that year.
Yeah, they pretty much. I don't even know if they had a completed script when they started filming.
Yeah,
I mean, which is why it's only about 90 minutes long. It's probably the shortest Bond movie ever.
Yeah, well, and then on the flip side, I guess from what I've read, No Time to Die is the longest Bond
Almost
film.
3 hours. I think 2 hours 45 is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, like I've tried to avoid spoilers, but I had to go online for 2 things. I had to find out, A, is it woke? Because that's one thing that like a lot of people were afraid.
Yeah.
And I kind of was too, especially with like all of the Me Too articles that like Sean Connery that came out that were kind of like just ridiculous. And then the length too, and fortunately from what I've heard, it's not woke. And
no,
then,
I'm hearing it's not woke. That's not what's polarizing about it. Apparently, the ending is I know, and I haven't seen it. I've avoided all spoilers, but I'm hearing, like, I know just by picking through different Bond sources and fans that I know, it's up and down. Some people did not like the ending. Some people love the ending. So I'm hearing all sorts. So I'm really intrigued about this ending that I'm hearing about. Which, and again, that's all I'm trying to stay away from everything else. I don't know anything else about it.
Yeah, same here. I mean, a few people have like tried to tag me in spoilers, but I've kind of like swiped and deleted them before I've been able to,
Same.
Yeah. Which is getting harder and harder to do with, the internet just being what it is. But
and the fact that the UK they had preview showings. I think the premiere was last Tuesday, and they were having preview shows on Wednesday. I think it officially opened on Friday, and so all the UK has seen it, and they're all over the internet now. And I mean, I have tickets for Wednesday night, and I still got 3 more days, and I'm just trying as best I can to avoid everything I can.
Yeah, and then the theaters here in Florida, like I haven't found any early shows, except for Friday. Yeah, so like I'm still
Really?
almost,
You're waiting till you don't the earliest you get is Friday.
I'm trying to see if maybe I can, if like maybe there's a theater here that does early, but like the thing with it is too is you have to pay like extra for those here, I think. So
Yeah, I shelled out a pretty penny for my I'm going Wednesday night to an IMAX showing, and it's not too cheap. I'm probably going to do a second and third by the weekend, and I'll just go regular digital cheapy, couple matinees maybe, but yeah, I shelled out for the IMAX on Wednesday.
hey, well it's Craig's, last one, so might as well. And as I mentioned to you on Facebook, I'd love to do a follow-up to this, just kind of like a spoiler reaction. So, by then there will be a lot to get into. But one thing I want to kind of ask you is, so far, where would you kind of rank all the Bonds?
The actors or the movies?
The actors.
People ask me that all the time, and honestly, I don't really have a ranking. I mean, I always say what my favorite Bond is usually the Bond I'm watching at the moment. I mean, Roger Moore was my first. I love Roger. I went back and watched Sean Connery and loved Sean Connery. I found a VHS copy of On Her Majesty's Secret Service and watched it and adored that movie. I had heard people say, oh, that's the one to avoid. I loved it. And I thought Lazenby was really, really good. And then in 87, I was like 16, Living Daylights came out. And the lead up to that, I remember seeing an interview with Timothy Dalton, and as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to be perfect. And he said he was going to go back to the books in his portrayal. So that encouraged me to start reading James Bond. And because of Timothy Dalton, I really got into the novels, and I saw Living Daylights, and after that, License to Kill, and I adore Timothy Dalton. I mean, I don't want to say he's my favorite, but I loved those movies. I loved his portrayal. And all this time I was it was weird. I had my own little TV set, and one TV show I used back in the 80s, I used to never miss, was Remington Steele. I loved Remington Steele. So when Pierce took over when he got a second chance at it after having to bow out for Living Daylights, when he got to actually do it in GoldenEye, I loved Pierce Brosnan. I thought his movies, I loved his portrayal. I'm not a huge fan of Die Another Day, but even when I watch Die Another Day and roll my eyes at certain scenes, Pierce Brosnan is spot on. I mean, the man, delivers such a great performance in all four of his movies. And, unfortunately, the material, in my opinion, in Die Another Day didn't serve him well. He brought it. He was amazing. And Daniel Craig, I love Daniel Craig as well. I'm sad to see him go, but I'll reserve judgment on No Time to Die till I see it. But so far, I love something about each and every actor who's played Bond, and I really couldn't pick one over another.
Same here. I mean, the one criticism that not that Daniel Craig gets, but that Roger Moore gets, is that his movies are really, campy. And yeah, I mean, a lot of his movies, particularly by like the early 80s, get to be ridiculous. But I've always kind of said, well, Roger Moore is kind of like portraying the Hugh Hefner of the James Bonds.
No matter how, I mean, one thing I will say about Roger Moore, when you watch the two first ones, like Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun, those are more reality based.
Yeah.
I love his portrayal in those movies. And it's weird how, much like Pierce Brosnan in Die Another Day, no matter how crazy it gets in Spy Who Loved Me's got the bigger gadgets. Moonraker, he's going on a shuttle. Roger Moore always plays it straight. I love the fact that he can do he can get on a space shuttle and go to a space station with laser guns. or he can stand up the edge of a cliff with an assassin who's teetering in a car and deliver a cold-blooded line and kick the car and send him to his death. He's consistent through, no matter how it is, how crazy it is. Even in A View to a Kill, when he's clearly getting up there, it's an older Bond. I love his performance in that movie. I mean, the movie's got some issues, but I don't know. Roger Moore, I think, some of the movies get a little up and down, but I think I thought he was just consistently cool in those movies. So I'm a big Roger Moore fan, and I mean, Moonraker up until recently was adjusted for dollar values, is still one of the highest grossing Bond movies of all time. I mean, so Octopussy, I must have seen. I love that movie. I think that's that's one of my favorite. Of the Roger Moores, Octopussy is one of my favorite movies. And some say he's definitely starting to show his age, but I think that's a solid story, and I'm a big fan of that one.
Yeah, he still has, I believe, the longest tenure as.
Well, he has the most movies.
Yeah.
He's got 7 movies under his belt. Connery technically has 7. He's got 6, and then he's got a 7th unofficial one.
Right.
Length of time, though, Daniel Craig has been Bond longer than anyone. He started in, if you start in 2006 with Casino, he's going on like 15 years as Bond, and nobody held the crown that long. So time-wise, he's been Bond the longest. But as far as official Bonds, Roger's got 7, and then Sean's got 6, with an asterisk with that "Never Say Never Again." His Bond movie,
which is very polarizing in and of itself, because some people hate that movie, some people love it, and the first time I saw it, I wasn't aware that it was an official tie-in. So at first I was kind of like, what's this? But then once I did like some more reading and kind of like watched it again, I'm kind of like, oh, it's not great, but I like it for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
For what it is. So, and then Dalton, I feel, is still kind of underrated.
Oh, in my opinion, very underrated.
Yeah.
Although, I think people are more and more coming around to him. The BBC this past summer, the BBC did a poll of the top rank, with all their viewers, rank the Bonds. And of course, number 1 was Sean Connery. Number 2 was Timothy Dalton. He beat out Roger Moore, Daniel Craig, everyone else in a BBC poll. So his stock value has gone up. A lot of people are going back and discovering Timothy Dalton.
Yeah, and then I've read like some crazy crazy supposed treatments for what would have been his third movie, and I don't know.
There's a great book. I've got it around here somewhere. There's a great book that's The Lost Stories of James Bond that just came out, and the author got a hold of the treatments, and it's really interesting. It's really interesting at what that third Bond movie, because it sounded like they were going to try, because as dark as License to Kill was, they were going to try and go into maybe a little bit of a lighter tone.
Yeah, I read a treatment or something. It might have been a fan fiction because it was on. It might have been like a fan fiction masquerading as like a treatment because it was on Reddit. Who knows? But like I read like a script concept to where like they were going to do the plot kind of Patriot Games, the Harrison Ford, Tom Clancy movie. They were going to do that. Kind of in the Bond universe, and then they were actually going to have Angie Everhart as one of the Bond girls, which for that alone, I think would have been interesting. But again, I think that's more or less maybe fan fiction.
Yeah, the official, if you get the Lost Adventures of James Bond, I think it's written by a man named Mark Idlitz. and he had access to the actual drafts that were written by the writers. Like I think the opening sequence involved robot guards, so there was kind of a robot element into it.
Yeah.
Where they were kind of going in a lighter direction for Timothy because some people thought License to Kill was just too dark of a movie for James Bond. So that's what I think they were kind of, which, when you look at GoldenEye, which was the next filmed movie, it is definitely, lighter in tone. Pierce plays it a little lighter.
Yeah, Pierce is an interesting one because a lot of people are like, oh, well, GoldenEye is good, but the rest are complete garbage. And I'm
No.
And I'm like, nah, sure. Tomorrow Never Dies, not perfect, although I think that one I think Tomorrow Never Dies has actually aged better because originally it was kind of like, this is insane, corporate news medias would never publish fake news.
No, never.
And now 20 years later, it's like, this might actually be the most spot on, Bond plot.
I loved Tomorrow Never Dies, and honestly, I loved The World Is Not Enough. I thought the idea that I'm not a big fan of Denise Richards, but the idea that, spoilers to anyone who hasn't seen it, that the Bond girl, Electra King, turns out to be the Bond villain, and she's behind it all. And the guy you think is the Bond villain, Renard, is actually her henchman. He serves her, and they are getting revenge against and doing stuff that Skyfall would later repeat, where someone wants revenge against M, they kidnap M, Bond has to rescue M. Her life is in danger. But I love the plot of that movie. I loved World Is Not Enough. Now, if you want to quibble about Die Another Day, that's another discussion. But those first three, I think are solid films.
The thing with Die Another Day is Die Another Day came out at a point where the James Bond video game franchise was really huge, especially on the consoles. And so I think that that movie was kind of used to market the games, kind of, so to speak. So
was there a game for Die Another Day?
There wasn't an official game, but there was 007 Nightfire that was.
Oh yeah. I was kind of hit or miss with the video games. I was kind of in and out. I kind of grabbed a few at the time. I've got a few of the Bond video games here.
Yeah.
What I got here, but but for the PS1, definitely. Tomorrow Never Dies, I played.
Yeah.
And 007 Racing for PS1. I had those. And then, Agent Under Fire.
Yeah, Agent Under Fire and then Nightfire were kind of the two, I guess, prequel kind of tie-ins for, for Die Another Day. So,
and then then Everything or Nothing was one that they came out with, and it was kind of marketed as a Bond movie because they got it was kind of, because I think Pierce is in it. I never got that one. I think they even composed a Bond song for it, so they kind of designed it as its own little movie.
They did. That was kind of Pierce's unofficial send off, and they
was that after Die Another Day?
Yeah, that was 2 years after. So that was Pierce's official send off, and some people, because Heidi Klum did voiceover and modeling work for that, so technically she would be considered a Bond girl if you count Everything or Nothing as canon. But that's kind of that. The other interesting thing with canon is now because of Craig, I guess they're saying that Craig's entire run of Bond is kind of his own
I
thing.
mean, the thing about Bond canon, I kind of look at it kind of like the Batman franchise. I mean, you have different actors take over and they kind of have their own canon. They're all Bruce Wayne. They all share a similar past. But I mean, and because, Timothy, you have Sean Connery and then immediately George Lazenby. And then, he kind of, he looks at all the stuff. So he obviously had the same adventures that Connery did. And that's tied together. He marries Tracy. She gets killed. Then you go into Roger Moore, and he's his own Bond, but, he's had similar experiences. We see him at the graveside of Tracy, his wife, and, he later kind of meets Blofeld, I guess, in For Your Eyes Only. And then you get Timothy Dalton, who's obviously older and wasn't a young guy during Goldfinger, but you kind of get the idea that he had kind of those adventures as well. They talk about his wife being, in License to Kill, they make another reference back to Tracy, his wife that died. So it's like each Bond they all share a kind of a similar history in their own way. And then Pierce the same way. He kind of, in Die Another Day, you see he's in Q's shop and you see all the different gadgets and everything.
Yeah.
But then within each of these sort of little multiverse, I guess, if you want, certain characters carry over. Like Bernard Lee acted alongside 3 different Bonds. Q acted, Desmond Llewellyn worked with 5 different Bonds. And so, obviously he's not, when he's interacting with Pierce Brosnan, he's not thinking, oh boy, your face changes all the time. It's just kind of understood that these were each a little soft reboot.
Right.
And with Daniel Craig, I kind of see it seems like it's going to wind up being, using the Batman analogy, kind of like the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, where it's going to be, you had Batman Begins, and then in the last one, Dark Knight Rises, you see him leave and stop being Batman. I get the idea that that's what this is going to be. You see Bond become a 00, and I don't know, in No Time to Die, I think it's going to be an ending where he stops being 007, maybe. I don't know. So
yeah.
It's kind of its own thing as well. So I just kind of, it's one of those things I'm like, it is what it is. I just kind of accept it. It doesn't bother me. And when whoever takes over after this, it's probably going to be someone younger, someone probably in their 30s. And I hope they bring M, Q, Moneypenny, and Tanner from the Craig movies and carry them over. But, just with the understanding that, okay, this is a different universe and they're just used to working with this Bond, like they did in the previous movies.
Right.
I really love those actors and I love those characters. I mean, they kind of did that with Judi Dench. I mean, she was the M for Pierce Brosnan, but then when they reboot it and Bond is having his origin story in Casino Royale, here she is, making him a 00, which of course would contradict everything in GoldenEye, where she comes along at the end. He's already a 00 when she first meets him.
Right.
But
yeah.
It's another time, it's just another character's time stream, if you want to use a sci-fi reference, and you just accept it. So I hope I hope when we get another Bond that carries over, and I'll just accept that this is a brand new story with a brand new Bond.
Yeah, and I mean they've done that with Bond in the books too a little bit. They've mostly kept it to Fleming, to kind of like Fleming's Bond in the book, but there have been like a few spin-offs where they've like rebooted Bond in the books.
Right. When you get into to jump to the novels, I mean, Ian Fleming's novels were set pretty much the 50s and kind of crossed into the 60s a little bit. And then John Gardner takes the same character, keeps him at that age, and you just accept everything that happened is canon. He's just now kind of jumped ahead in time. And then Raymond Benson took over in around 2000. Again, it's the same character with the same past. He went through all the same adventures, but now he's jumped to present day. And then it really wasn't until, and then there's been some standalone authors who some have kept him in present day, And then the most recent author, Anthony Horowitz, he's taken him back and he's writing period novels. So he wrote a prequel. Well, he wrote a sequel to Man with a Golden Gun that's period piece. And then he went back and wrote a prequel to Casino Royale, which is a 50s period piece.
Which I think is really well done. And
he's got a third one coming out next year. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I saw that. So when people complain out my point with that is when people complain out the actors always changing chronology and whatnot. I'm like, well, they've done the same thing with books, and even like I know that like Dynamite Comics was even doing like a James Bond like comic book series.
Oh, it's still going on. Yeah, I've got all the graphic novels. It's still going. Yeah, there's a brand new one that comes out next month.
Yeah, our mutual friend Rob Lorich actually told me about that. So
they're amazing. They're amazing. I've been really enjoying the Dynamite series.
Yeah. So in terms of who should be the next Bond, I mean, another.
Man, I mean, I think they're going to go with everyone. I keep hearing Henry Cavill, Tom Hardy. I don't think they're not going with any big. Yeah, right now Henry Cavill is The Witcher. He's Superman. Tom Hardy's Venom, and I think he's supposed to be Mad Max again. They never seem to go with the big star.
Right.
Connery was an unknown. George Lazenby was an unknown. Roger Moore was a TV actor. Timothy Dalton wasn't really a starring role kind of guy. He was actually the second choice. They were going after TV actor Pierce Brosnan when they couldn't get him. They got Timothy Dalton, who, again, I had only seen in Flash Gordon. I really didn't know much about Timothy Dalton at all. And then with Daniel Craig, I remember, everyone, like now, everyone's saying Henry Cavill's the favorite. Back in 2006 or 2005 when it was going into pre-production, everyone was certain it was Clive Owen. Everyone was saying, Vegas odds say Clive Owen is the next Bond. We've got the scoop. Clive Owen is the next James Bond. And then they come out and they say it's Daniel Craig, and everyone's like, who? And so I have a feeling that the next one's going to be the same way. I don't think anybody knows except maybe the Broccoli's. I don't know if there's anyone out. I just trust them to pick whoever. I do kind of like. There's a British actor named Aidan Turner.
Oh yeah,
I'd known him from the Hobbit movies. He was a dwarf, and then he's mostly known as a TV actor now. He stars in a series called Poldark, but he did an Agatha Christie movie a couple years ago. It's on Amazon Prime called And Then There Were None. And there's a scene where they all come to dinner, and of course it's England, so they all dress up for dinner. He walks in a tux, and he's got a cigarette, and he sits down, and he's smoking. And I remember watching that movie like, damn, if he would not be an amazing Bond. He looked like Ian Fleming's Bond. Yeah. He's kind of got a slimmer build. He's kind of got the features where you could kind of almost Timothy Dalton-esque. And I would love to see Aidan Turner as James Bond. I think he would be a really good actor.
Yeah, I think he would be good too. And like you, I've told my people, like, they're not going to pick anyone from the mainstream. Like, they're going to pick some guy that we've probably never heard of. And if we have, it's because, like, those of us who are diehard, movie and TV people will have, heard of.
Right.
I doubt it's going to be. I mean, I keep hearing Henry Cavill, and I'm like, I see it, but his star power is already too big. Maybe that if they had gotten to him before he did Superman, maybe then I could see it. But
I've even heard rumors he screen tested back in the Casino Royale days. He was kind of on the radar back then, but I don't know. I mean, if he becomes Bond, so be it. I mean, I'm not going to not see the movies. I don't see it. It would go against the pattern of everything that they've always done with previous.
Yeah. I just think I I think it's real interesting how the Bond rumor mill gets like started every few years with who is.
That's all they talk about. Yeah, it's crazy. I
I
can't think of anything else. I mean, at times, even more than Star Wars. I mean, there's always Star Wars. As Star Wars, if you follow Star Wars, there's always crazy Star Wars rumors. But man, when it comes to the next James Bond, everybody thinks they know. Everybody thinks they have the inside edge.
I remember like a few years ago that there was that rumor that Daniel Craig was going to quit, being Bond like after Spectre, and I was like, you guys, he's not going to quit. He has one more movie in his contract, and the reason he's saying that is because he's tired. He just got torn up to hell and back.
Oh,
So
he's, that people don't realize he has, especially on Quantum of Solace and every movie, he gets beat up. He's had like pro athletes level of injuries. He's had legs, he's had teeth knocked out. There's a great documentary on Apple TV now called Being James Bond. It's a 1-hour special that interviews Craig, Barbara Broccoli, and Michael G. Wilson, the producers. And when they were filming Spectre, they were filming the train sequence with Dave Bautista, and he told Dave Bautista, he's like, go all out, don't hold back on me, let's make this look real, which he learned to regret, because he got slammed down. He said he busted his leg so bad that when they went to go film the Mexico scene at the beginning, the Day of the Dead parade, there was supposed to be a huge chase, kind of like Casino Royale, where they're running and jumping and chasing through the parade, and his leg was in a brace, and he's like, I can't do it. So instead, if you remember back, he's kind of walking. Most of the shots are from the waist up, and he's just kind of walking through the crowd, stalking him, which I think actually is pretty effective. And he sees Sciarra, the guy he's chasing, and he just kind of walks, and it's a very, he's not running around as much just because he couldn't. He was in such pain. And he's, and as soon as he got done with the movie, it's like, the press is all over him saying, when are you going to do the next one? When are you going to do the next one? And poor guy's trying to recover. He's like, I'd rather slash my wrist than go back and do another Bond movie right now. And people kind of ran with that. But heck, when I get done mowing the lawn, if somebody, not that I love it, but, the last thing you feel like doing is going to do something else. When something takes it out of you, you don't feel like jumping right back in. And those are physically demanding for him.
Yeah. And I mean, I still bring up the chase scene from Casino Royale as like maybe one of the best like on foot chase scenes.
Oh, no doubt.
In a movie ever. Like I remember seeing that in the theater opening day, like as a teenager, and just being like, holy shit,
Yes.
Like, and it was one of those things like, obviously now with YouTube being what it is, you can see clips of almost anything. But, like back then, seeing it in theater and having like having no idea of what was going to, be going on, that was amazing. And I always remind people, I'm like, this is the guy who was literally like jumping on and off cranes, for.
And I'm somebody who's afraid. I'm not big on heights, so when I see him jumping from crane to crane, you're just like, oh my gosh, that's insane.
Oh yeah,
insane.
Yeah, and the fact that they were like fist fighting and doing all this stuff on top of so.
And I got to speaking of seeing it on the big screen, the first one I ever saw on the big screen was A View to a Kill, and I remember sitting in the theater and they're fighting on top of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I remember as a kid just watching that and going, oh my god, that is crazy. And you kind of watch it back now. Some people only see it on TV, but back in the day, that was pretty impressive.
No, it was. And I actually have a funny story about that. So when I was in San Francisco one time, I actually went on like a tour bus of San Francisco. And I think, if I remember correctly, they actually like shot that scene like pretty close to the actual Golden Gate Bridge. They they had to pull like a whole bunch of like permits, but
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
then like
they filmed on the Golden Gate Bridge. They filmed at San Francisco City Hall, Fisherman's Wharf. They were on location for a lot of that.
yeah, and then like I guess someone like called the cops because they thought that someone fell, and it turned out to be the dummy that they used for Max Zorin or whatever. So very interesting in terms of that. And yeah, and I remember the whole controversy with Idris Elba, being Bond or not, and there was all that speculation, and I think he would have been good. But I was kind of like, well, he's already John Luther, and
Well, and plus he's just, I mean, I can't say that I'm 51. He's like not that much younger than Daniel Craig. So I don't see them starting a Bond series with someone who's 50.
right.
He's about 50 now. It's 2012. We probably won't even see, or 2021. We probably won't even see a new Bond movie till 2023, 2024, maybe. It's probably at least going to be another 3 years before we get another Bond. So,
Yeah.
it's whoever they cast. I'm imagining right now, I would look to the younger actors. I mean, because again, we've mentioned. I mean, Cavill's still pretty young. Tom Hardy, I think, is even kind of in a few years is kind of getting up there a little bit. I think it's whoever they're looking for. I would look to the younger actors right now.
Yeah, so someone mentioned Tom Holland, and I don't see Tom
Maybe
Holland.
not that young. Maybe not that young.
Well, I don't see Tom Holland from a sense of he doesn't he's too young looking, but then also he's contracted with Disney right now, and
well, yeah, he's not only is he Spider-Man. I think he just signed on to do the Uncharted franchise. I think he's Nathan Drake, and they're doing a Nathan Drake movie, and he's Nathan Drake in it. They may have already filmed too, so he's starting a second franchise right now.
Yeah, so he already has two like franchises. I don't think they're going to let him do a third. His agent isn't.
At least not now. Maybe once those are way behind him and he ages, maybe another 10, 15 years, maybe. But yeah, I think he's a little too young.
Maybe if they wanted to do like a young James Bond, thing, maybe then he would be good for that role. But yeah, I just don't.
Have you read the speaking of young James Bond, have you read the young James Bond books?
I read them when I read like the first 2 or 3 when I was a kid, and then I was kind of like, well, then I'll start just reading the regular Fleming novels, which is kind of what I.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I kind of, honestly, I kind of like the young James Bond books. I thought, I know a lot of, there was Alex Rider is another one of the kind of literary young person spy series in books.
Yeah.
And I think Bond came out, ironically, young Alex Rider was written by Anthony Horowitz, the guy who's writing the Bond novels now.
Yeah, no, I know.
The young Bonds, I think, kind of came out as kind of like a little competition to kind of pull in some of that market, and I thought those were a lot of fun. I liked the young Bond books.
Yeah, no, I read the Alex Rider books as a kid, so then when Anthony Horowitz got named as the new Bond author, I was like, where have I seen that name? Oh yeah, there's where I've heard of that. So
he did a TV series. If you ever get a chance, there's a TV series he created and wrote that's not, it's kind of delves in the world of espionage. It's called Foyle's War, and it's a World War II series about a police officer, and they did about 6 or 7 seasons of it. Outstanding. The guy who played Bill Tanner in the Pierce Brosnan movies, Michael Kitchen, he stars in the series, and Anthony Horowitz, just an amazing writer. And there's a little bit of a espionage element to it as well. So yeah, if you're a fan of his, definitely check out that series.
Yeah, I don't know if you're like a big novel reader just in general, but one guy who I've really gotten into since his debut actually is Jack Carr, the former U.S. Navy SEAL.
I've heard of him.
He's written like these military kind of like spy revenge thrillers, and they're really good. So if you like the type of like darker stuff like the not the Living Daylights, but License to Kill, it's kind of like that with it's kind of like a mix of License to Kill with Taken and Bloodsport. So
that's one of the reasons I loved License to Kill so much. It reminded me, while not bits and pieces were taken from Ian Fleming, it reminded me a lot of that classic Fleming writing. Like, I could see Fleming's Bond just going out on a revenge mission.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't care. He didn't care about his job. I mean, and if you've read the novel You Only Live Twice, that's pretty much what he does. It's kind of, he goes to take down Blofeld and have a final confrontation with Blofeld to just nothing more than kill him for what he did to his wife.
Yeah. Isn't You Only Live Twice, if I remember correctly, isn't that in the book supposed to be like the sequel to On Her Majesty's?
Yeah. It's kind of a Spectre trilogy. It kind of starts with Thunderball, the novel, then it goes into On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and then You Only Live Twice is like the ramifications, which is kind of disappointing because when the movie came out, after you see On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Lazenby was supposed to come back for the next one, Diamonds Are Forever, and rumor was that they were going to kind of focus on the ramifications of what happened, make it a sequel, but then Lazenby just walked away. He dropped out, and they kind of just, they were like, okay, they were able to get Connery back, and they're like, okay, let's just forget the last movie and just kind of pretend and just kind of go from there. But yeah, they never really got to do a kind of true adaptation of the novel You Only Live Twice. But having read that novel and seen the trailer for No Time to Die, I kind of get the idea that they're carrying certain elements from that story are carrying over into this movie.
Yeah, without like grading into spoilers.
We'll save that for part 2.
They've without like grading into spoilers, the reviews I've read have said that there are definitely elements that like diehard fans will recognize from the novels of You Only Live.
Okay.
So, I don't know how much of a spoiler that is since it's been like a long time since I've read You Only Live Twice, but that idea is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, after we've seen it and we talk afterwards, I'll give you a little more insight into that if I think. Yeah.
Well, speaking of movies that we have seen and that we can kind of talk spoiler about, I know that you and I both saw The Many Saints of Newark. What are kind of your thoughts on? I didn't know that you were a Sopranos fan, but I shouldn't be. But I shouldn't really be surprised. So, what were your kind of thoughts on?
They were mixed. I liked the movie. I was surprised. I mean, I knew, and I don't know. Are we doing spoilers in this?
Yeah, we can do spoilers.
All right. It's gonna be, just so everybody knows, completely going into spoilers on this. The way it's marketed, I was expecting way more Tony Soprano, and even ahead of time, David Chase coming out in interviews saying, well, this isn't really Tony's story; it's Dickie Moltisante's story. He wasn't kidding. I mean, Michael Gandolfini. If you've seen the trailer, they hit most of the major scenes he's in. They kind of touch on in the trailer. There's maybe one or two that they don't, but it really is Alessandro Vela. I don't remember his last name. But the guy from Jurassic Park 3. That's all I know. But Dickie Moltisanti is the main star of the movie, and you really have to be paying attention to even pick out soprano characters in the background. And then when it's over, I remember thinking, wow, are we getting a follow-up? I'm hoping it played like part one of maybe a few more. Like we were just getting into Tony Soprano. We were just getting into the stuff, and the Dicky Moltisanti stuff was interesting. So I just was kind of like, I don't know. There was things I liked about it. There were a lot of great scenes in it, but then there was stuff in it that I was just kind of like, man, I kind of wanted more. So, but all in all, I enjoyed the movie.
I mean, I'm kind of with you. I would say that there were kind of parts, especially with like characters, like with Leslie Odom Jr.'s character and the whole kind of black mafia of New York. I feel like there was a lot of stuff that they could have done that they didn't do. Like in essence, my whole thing was, I'm like, okay, at the end, like, why am I supposed to care about this crew? Like, why?
Yeah, that was really that whole, because I again, from the trailers, you saw that they were kind of touch on the real life, the black riots of the time.
Right.
And the TV show itself makes reference to it a lot. In fact, there's an episode where oh gosh, it's been a while. There was a couple of politicians, and one was black, one was white, and they were both running for office or something and kind of getting into bed with Tony Soprano and his crew. And they are talking about the riots when they were younger and the parts they played in it. And when I saw the movie, the riots really, you don't see a lot of it, because you see one or two scenes in the trailer and you're like, oh wow, this looks like a big, but really it was kind of in the background. They really didn't, it was really more the Leslie Odom, his character Harold, and his relationship with Dicky Moltisanti. And the riots were just kind of more of a background thing. And again, that was another thing that the trailer kind of threw me off a bit.
Yeah.
And they really didn't, and that was another thing. They really didn't resolve. That's why I keep thinking this is like, it's almost like a first part of a series, because now you're thinking, okay, Tony thinks Harold is the one that's responsible for Dicky's death because he was witnessing all the animosity. He doesn't know that it was, again, spoilers, Uncle Junior, the one that ordered the hit. So you're thinking, okay, is there going to be any resolution to that? Because you see Tony kind of brooding. So in his mind, he thinks that it was Harold, but then you see the movie ends with Harold just kind of moving into a new house and everything. And it seems like his crew's okay. So I was like waiting for more. And so I don't know.
Well, not even that, but like the kind of the biggest like, WTF moment I had was the last scene that they show of, I'm sorry, they show Tony at the wake, but like the last kind of scene they show of Tony prior to that is when he's throwing the speakers out the window.
Yeah.
And he's telling his dad, I don't want any part of this. And I'm like, well, that's like, I'm like, okay, well, that, I'm like, they're going to have, I'm like, we're almost like, this movie's almost over. And like, that's kind of like an anticlimactic way to like.
We know he's coming back in, obviously. We know he's going back into the business. So, like, right, if you're watching it, you're thinking, what? Okay, what's going to bring him back in? Is it that he's going to take revenge for Uncle Dickie and try and hit Harold? You don't know. Something, he's still, all his friends are still kind of, Jackie Aprile. He's kind of getting to know, Pussy and Paulie and Silvio. And, while they said this isn't a Tony origin story, it kind of wasn't, because, you got a little taste of it, but it kind of left me at least wanting more, because now I kind of want to see where they're going to go with it. So I don't know if this is a standalone movie. It didn't seem like a standalone movie. It seemed like the first of maybe like a series of prequels.
Yeah, and what I said on Twitter was, I'm hoping it's not a standalone movie, because if it was a standalone movie, it was terrible. But if
It
it's
didn't play like a standalone movie. To use a Bond reference, going back, it's kind of like Spectre. When Spectre ended, I was just kind of like, okay, Blofeld's still alive. Bond is quitting the service and driving off. I was like, okay, I know that's not going to happen. Is there going to be? Hopefully, I'm assuming there's going to be a follow up. I kind of get the same thing with this. It's like I'm kind of okay. Hopefully, there's a follow up, because you really left this open ended.
Yeah, and kind of going back to Bond real quick, one of the things that was kind of disappointing with Spectre was, like Blofeld is supposed to be like, he's Bond's nemesis, and in the early movies where you get where you get Blofeld's reveal, he is quite menacing, and it's obvious.
Well, if you ignore Diamonds Are Forever with
Yeah,
Blofeld getting in drag,
right.
they kind of, that one really kind of let the menacing go. But yeah, You Only Live Twice and On Her Majesty's, I thought both Blofelds were amazing.
Right.
And I love both those actors. I don't know if you can see, I have my little Telly Savalas 12-inch Blofeld here.
Oh, interesting.
And but and even in the prior to those movies, when Blofeld was just in the shadows and you saw hands and him stroking a cat, they really built him up as a menace. And when I heard Christoph Waltz was playing Blofeld, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be amazing, because I love that actor. I think he's going to do an amazing job. And the writing I think the writing they gave him to harp on Spectre, which is a movie I don't bash a lot. I mean, I can still watch and enjoy, but them taking over a surveillance of the Nine Eyes program, I was like, okay, that's kind of low stakes. And the torture scene I thought was pretty good, although the drilling in the back of the head with Bond, that's taken from the books. That's actually that whole scene was lifted from if you've ever read Colonel Sun.
Yeah.
That whole scene was taken from that book, but I thought it was pretty effective in the movie. But in the end, I was just kind of like let down by Blofeld. So that's why in No Time to Die, they're bringing Blofeld back, and I'm really hoping that they give him that gravitas and that menace as the guy who's kind of behind Safin and maybe behind all this, the still ruling Spectre. I'm really hoping for something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm the same way. I was when I saw that Christoph, Waltz wasn't. I'm like, and I'm a Quentin Tarantino fan, so I've seen Inglourious Basterds. I've seen how sadistic he can be, and I'm like, oh sweet, we're going from Javier Bardem playing arguably my favorite Bond villain, to Christoph Waltz. This is going to be good, and I'm like. And I was kind of like, this guy isn't really giving me like any creepy vibes or anything whatsoever. I should be like.
Plus, the whole "I'm your brother" thing, I thought just fell flat. I was not a fan of that at all.
I mean, yeah, it kind of reminded me like they tried to do like Blofeld, also a bit of Alec Trevelyan too, with Waltz's Blofeld, but yeah, again, it just fell flat.
And again, they took most of that kind of from the books. If you've read the short stories, there's the short story Octopussy is Bond, an agent has killed, because the character Oberhauser, the man who, after his parents died, he went to stay with and he taught him how to ski. All that's from the books. That's in the story. He lives to an older age, and this Major Dexter Smythe killed Oberhauser. And then he went into hiding. Bond tracks him down and kills him. Well, he goes to kill him. he goes out to sea and is killed by his pet octopus, Octopussy. So they kind of took Octopussy, the movie, took that story and said, oh, well, that guy had a daughter named Octopussy, and Bond let him live, or let him go out on his own terms. They used that element for that movie, but then they took the idea of this guy who watched over Bond for a year before he went into full-time custody of his aunt. But this guy Oberhauser, they took that concept and said, well, maybe if he lived with him for a year, what if he had a son, and the son was incredibly jealous, and then that son became Blofeld. So it's like I felt like, okay, you didn't need to add all that. He could just be Blofeld. I mean, that's enough. I think they were trying to, because Skyfall did such an amazing job drawing from his past, bringing in, the memory of his parents, the place where he grew up. But then they like, oh, let's kind of bring more of his past in. That worked in Skyfall. Let's do that in Spectre now. And it just kind of fell, for me, it fell really flat. And so I was like, okay.
Yeah, I thought that with like bringing the parents in, they were going to like, that was kind of like setting something up to like, bring like in more information about that. And then they kind of never, they mentioned it like a little bit, but they didn't do as much with that as they could have. So yeah, I'm hoping that we definitely get, Blofeld, like more, the Blofeld we know. So
because I think if it's written right, I think Christoph Waltz could do it. I mean, now, as we know from the end of Spectre, he's got the scar. Now we've seen a couple scenes in the movie, but it's almost a 3-hour movie, so there's a ton we haven't seen yet. I think if written right, hopefully he's not in a jail cell the whole time like Hannibal Lecter, but I would like to see him really up the menace factor, and I think he could do it if they write it right, if they write it well enough.
Yeah, and I mean, if they really want to, and again, this isn't spoilers, but from what I've read, they're kind of making Madeline into the Tracy, into Craig's Tracy, so to speak, which I kind of saw them doing at the end of Spectre anyway.
Same here. I thought for sure, I was like, okay, if she's back in it, she's got like the opening sequence, they're going to kill her off and Bond's going to go after revenge. But it looks like she's a main character throughout the movie. So that's kind of, that little theory's out the window. But I think there's some truth to that. I think there might be some Tracy element with Madeline Swan, because this is like someone like at the end of On Her Majesty's Secret Service that he is going to get in a car with and drive away at the end and go live happily ever after with.
Yeah, I do know that, like, I do know from what I've heard from some like the non-spoiler reviews, I guess the opening like prologue or whatever after the gun barrel sequence is 30 minutes long.
I heard it's a very long opening.
So yeah, like we're a good 30 minutes into the movie before we even get like a title sequence.
Which I think before that, the record was The World Is Not Enough has, I think, almost a 20-minute opening sequence before the titles come on.
Yeah.
I think that holds the record of the longest, but I think this one, I think this one's going to beat it.
That one is also my favorite opening.
Yes, I went when I was in London. I like to hit all the I like to check off Bond filming locations, and I kind of went to areas along the Thames that were used in that movie, leading all the way up to the Millennium Center, where at the end, where the chase ends. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. So, and then a question that I always get asked that is really hard to rank is favorite Bond girl.
Wow, that's a good one too. Honestly, I love Tracy. Talking about Tracy, Diana Rigg as Tracy is up there as one of my favorites, because she is, whenever a new Bond movie comes out, they always say, oh, this Bond is going to be James Bond's equal, and they never are. And they've tried to make. She was one that was such a complicated character. She seemed like she was Bond's equal in that she had a crappy past. Her mother died. Especially if you read the novel, you get even more of her past. But she's just had a terrible life, and she felt, at the beginning of the movie, she tries to kill herself. And she just has this hole in her life, and then she meets James Bond, and it's like the two of them kind of complete something in each other. And there's a moment, one of my favorite moments of the movie, and she's a capable person, because one of my favorite moments in the movie, Lazenby's being chased, and he's just come out of Piz Gloria, and he's running around in the small town, and the guys are closing in, and he's near a skating rink, and he's sitting there, and he's slumped down, and he's looking down at the ground, and Lazenby does an amazing job. Near panic. He knows, he's like, there's nothing I can do. I'm totally screwed. And then he just sees her skate up, and he looks up.
Right, yeah.
She comes to his rescue. They get into her car. She drives, and I mean, she's super capable. And she just is like a complete, I don't know. She's probably one of my favorite Bond girls of all. And Diana Rigg does such an amazing job with her. And I really love that movie, and I love her portrayal.
Yeah, I mean, On Her Majesty's, I think, is one of the best Bond films ever. It's very underrated. That one it has to be the most underrated one, particularly because I think Lazenby only did one.
Right.
But yeah, she's one of my top Bond girls. I mean, I would say that like Natalia from GoldenEye is another one that ranks pretty high.
It's interesting with Natalia. One thing I noticed about her, she is a devastatingly beautiful actress.
Oh yeah.
Most of the movie, though, she dresses very plainly. She's very smart. They underplay the sort of almost the opposite of every other Bond girl. They very much underplay her beauty and make her a very smart character, because she, when it comes to computers and technology, Bond's a dinosaur. She is very smart, very capable, but they downplay the exterior.
Yeah.
And she's a very, very intelligent person.
She's the opposite of Denise Richards, where
yeah, that's true.
Where, and as a kid who grew up in the 90s, I have to say I'm a fan of Denise Richards for other reasons. But yeah, it's like, come on, I'm not buying that. She's a nuclear physicist. So
Dr. Christmas Jones. Oh, Lordy.
I think Christmas only comes once, so a year.
Yes.
So yeah.
And I love Vesper. There's so many more that just amazing portrayals. It's talking about talking about Pierce. I liked, I'm blanking on her name now. From
Michelle Yeoh.
Michelle Yeoh. I loved her character. I thought she was a fantastic character. I liked, as bad as Christmas Jones was, I thought Electra King, played by Sophie Marceau, I thought she was amazing. I thought she was stunning in that movie. Such a good actress, because she plays the helpless Bond girl who's like, protect me, to becoming this cold-blooded killer who's going to kill M and have her boyfriend, set off a nuclear device. So I think she's amazing as well. So I don't know. There's such a rich history.
Yeah. And it's really one of those things where it's like, well, you can't just pick one, because there's, like so many of the Bonds, they span the decades. I think I can't remember either the name of the Bond girl or the actress, but the one from Russia with Love. I think
Daniela Bianchi played Natalia Romanova.
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah,
Romanova.
Romanova or something. Yeah,
Romanova. Yes.
From Russia with Love is a very good Cold War, piece. And prior to seeing that for the first time, they actually made like a video game remake of From Russia with Love.
Yes, I have it somewhere.
Which is kind of weird because if you count the remake, yep, I played that. I played that many times. In fact, that was kind of, again, going back to that summer where I rewatched the entirety of the Bond series through the first time. That was kind of my inspiration to do that, so to speak.
Connery came back to do the voice in that.
Yeah, which I thought was interesting, and I wish they had done that for like some of the other ones, maybe, but
Maybe Daniel Craig came back for a couple. I think he did. Did he do Bloodstone?
Yeah, he did Bloodstone, and then he did a remake of GoldenEye that was like supposed to be a sequel. It was like supposed to be kind of like the conclusion of the Casino Royale, Quantum, and then it was always going to be a conclusion of that series before heading into Skyfall.
Was that 007 Legends?
No, that was the remake of like GoldenEye Reloaded or something, I think.
Oh, okay.
Was what. So they somehow fit GoldenEye into the Craig chronology with that, but
okay.
And I mean it was okay, but it wasn't great. It wasn't like the original 64 game. It was just kind of like a reskin, which
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard.
It's a little jarring just to hear Pierce's lines come out of Craig's mouth. I guess so. But yeah, I think the Bond franchise in terms of games, they haven't had one for like I think 10 or 11 years now. So
they did announce one's coming. I forget who's doing it. A new company's picked up the license, and nobody knows anything about it. But there is one in development right now.
Yeah. Supposedly the ones who did the Hitman games, which I've never played.
Me neither.
So I don't. Yeah. So I'm not as much of a gamer as I used to be when I was a kid. Neither. So. Maybe one of your kids could kind of be like the test, the test dummy for that sort of thing. So, but anyway, well, any final thoughts on Bond with The Sopranos or anything?
Nope. I'm just like I said. I'm just looking forward to seeing No Time to Die, and I'm really curious. I've been waiting for this movie for like everyone else, for a very long time. So
yeah,
I'll be very curious to see what happens.
I am curious now because I kind of reached a point where I was kind of like, I was hyped for it and then I just lost complete interest, and I was kind of like,
a lot of people, yeah.
I was kind of like, well, I'm not going to get excited for it until I see, that there's like an official. When the premiere happens, then I'll believe that it happened.
Yeah, that's pretty much until I'm sitting in the theater and it's on in front of me. I was like, I'm not gonna get my hopes up.
Yeah, because we had there were like 5 release dates.
6.
Wow.
It was originally supposed to be November 2019. They pushed it back to Valentine's Day, and 2020, if they stuck with that, the movie would have come out. And they're like, well, let's push it back a little bit. April 2020, and that was the kiss of death. COVID came, went back to October 2020, November 2020. That didn't happen. Went to April 2021, and then that didn't happen. And now we've got this date, and we'll see. I mean, it's out. It looks like it's done. I got my tickets. The movie's already out. So, half the, Europe's already seen it. So there's, they can't delay it now. So it looks like it's finally here. It is here. I'll be there Wednesday night.
Yeah, and then, you know, Amazon just bought MGM too, which I find very interesting.
Yeah.
Too, and I'm interested to see what the ramifications for the future of Bond are. So, all right, sir. Well, thanks for coming on. And where can people find you if they would like to, you know, get in touch with you or, you know, look up your podcast or anything like that?
Podcast of the Apes. It's, you know, do a search. It's there. I'm all over Facebook. No, I don't really do Twitter that much, but yeah, that's pretty much where you can find me.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Mark, and we'll have to have you on, you know, here pretty soon to,
Part
you know,
two.
yeah, part 2. So we're definitely planning on it. And, you know, thanks for going on. I know this podcast has been in the making for almost as long as No Time to Die itself has. So really appreciate it.
Right.
But anyway, thanks for coming on, man. Really appreciate
it. Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Whitfield Report on the NGC Network. Please visit Sam's website at www.thesamwhitfield.com and support Sam on Patreon at patreon.com/Whitfield Report. Until next time, God bless, God save this great nation, and God, freedom, legacy, in that order.